from a legal standpoint, what does Mr. Harpole, Brian Harpole, actually have to prove to win his case against Candace? And what are the biggest hurdles that you see standing in his way?
This is a classic, straightforward case of defamation. I mean, there's other claims.
So this would be in your house. This would be in your wheelhouse.
This is my wheelhouse. This is my playground.
All right.
And so the elements, there's a few elements, right, for defamation. Brian has to prove that Candace made statements about him that were factual. So we're not capturing statements that are opinion. It's right. False statements of fact, okay? That those statements were about him, that they were not subjective statements that could have been identifying any random Joe, that they were definitely about Brian, okay? Mm-hmm. Number 3, that they were published to third parties. So in other words, it wasn't Candace talking to Brian and Brian talking to Candace. Some other third party received it. That's obviously a no-brainer because this is on a podcast, okay? These statements were of and concerning Brian, which we talked about. It identifies Brian Harpole. And that they caused harm, some recognized level of harm. And there is such a thing as defamation per se, which is being alleged here. We'll talk about that versus regular defamation in a second. And then Brian would have to prove that Candace acted with the requisite degree of fault, which if it's a private person, if Brian, the plaintiff, is a private person by law, the standard is negligence. He only has to show that Candace Owens made the statements with negligence. If the court determines that he was a public figure or a limited purpose public figure, the standard jumps to actual malice. Actual malice means knowledge of falsity or reckless disregard for the truth. That means you have to show, and it's a high standard, he has to prove that Candace made the statements knowing that they were false, or that she had very, very doubtful information and she knew that it was doubtful, but she said it anyway. And that's what we call the public figure standard.
So let me ask you this question. Up until Candace accused him of being involved with Charlie Kirk's unaliving, Brian Harpole was not a public figure until he went on the Sean Ryan podcast and talked about it after the fact. So she had already said this before he went on to the Sean Ryan show. So does that stand that public figure standard step in play now, or was it when she did it? Because she tripled and quadrupled down after the fact, but she had said pretty much some pretty damning things before he ever went on the podcast. So what would you say?
So just to take a step back. So this case, correct me if I'm wrong, it's going on in Tennessee, right? It's a Tennessee District Court case, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe Tennessee, yes.
Somebody can fact check me, but I believe that's correct. Tennessee has a standard for whether this person, the plaintiff, is a limited purpose public figure or a public figure. It's generally the same standard. And that is whether this person sought out publicity on this issue before the statements were made. Mm-hmm. And so to answer your question, clearly he did not. Correct. I mean, Brian Harpole nobody really knew who he was. He didn't start a controversy. Now, if there were statements about him post making a podcast appearance, the standard could change on that. So in other words, the standard goes statement by statement, because in this situation, you have a fact pattern where Brian did maybe call himself, get into the public light. But the argument Brian's going to make is very simple. The argument is, once she went on this defamation campaign, I had to defend my reputation, and I had to only say the limited things I could say to rebut these allegations, because my life is on the line. I'm getting death threats, and et cetera, et cetera. I think, I personally think that Brian will be found to be a private person. I don't think the public figure status is going to apply to him.
Got you. So what hurdles do you think that he would have to overcome? Or do you foresee, especially since he's in your playground, do you think, oh yeah, that one's going to be hard for you to deal with? Or that one right there, that's a tough one. Do you have anything particular of those 5 elements that you brought up that you feel like he's going to have a hard time with?
You know, let me give you my quick and dirty take on this case. And look, this can change. So whenever this video gets published, you guys are watching it live, tomorrow or a month from now, evidence
Right.
could come out and it could change this. We could talk about, somebody asked about the recusal. We could talk about that too. But generally, I think that Brian has a very strong defamation case. He has great lawyers. I've said this before. I don't know his lawyers. I've read the complaint. They made some extremely detailed allegations. They did their homework, okay? And they assumed, Jay, I love when lawyers do this. They assumed that Candace is going to argue at some point that he is a public figure. And so they alleged knowledge of falsity within their complaint. So some of the examples, like Candace's access to flight records before publishing them about the Fort Huachuca allegations, right? She had access to those. How could she say he was somewhere where he wasn't? And then later she tried to cover for it, saying, well, it is possible, blah, blah, blah. She continued after getting, verification, I would say, of flight records. She doubled down on the allegations. That's going to be a hard thing for her to overcome, okay?
I agree.
I think the damages are probably very strong here because listen, of all the things you can accuse somebody of, murder is probably the most heinous.
That's fair.
And this is a guy who ran a private security company. Are you going to hire him?
So I have a hard time. He's not getting hired, right?
Even if the allegation was, and again, she said this, that he at least knew that Charlie was going to be ended because he didn't make adequate, he didn't schedule any security for his next scheduled talk, which means he knew he was going to be going down, which implies knowledge of a crime that's going to happen. And again, are you going to hire somebody? Even the allegation, Jay, alone
it's crazy, right?
It is sufficient for people to be like, you know what, I don't know Brian or not, but we were going to hire him for this security event. Maybe we don't.
Wow.
So, these are things that make it devastating for Candace. I don't know what I don't know what her defense strategy is. I feel like she's doubled down in a way that just harms her. I wish she didn't, but.
Well, her strategy is to recuse all the judges, like impugn all the judges so they all have to recuse themselves. Can you explain that? What happened with the whole, like, her lawyer has sued every judge? It was a very weird exchange. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, and so what happened was the judges recused themselves, and I'm trying to. This was in the Tennessee case, or this was the McCrone case.
It's Tennessee.
It's the Tennessee. Okay. Look, the recusal, the court's order doesn't state the reason for the recusal. So we can only speculate, okay? I don't know if the real reason will ever come out. The judges simply announced that they recused and that the Sixth Circuit, which is the next court above them, the Court of Appeals for that district, would assign an outside judge to hear the case. The timing of it brought a lot of speculation because apparently, Candace had retained, I guess, this guy, George Farmer, and her husband.
That's her.
Right?
Her husband's George Farmer.
Yeah.
Her husband's George Farmer. And I forgot the name. I think they said Daniel Horowitz. Yeah, there it is right there. I think this is the lawyer that has sued the entire middle district of Tennessee. That's crazy.
Did he actually? So I don't know this, and I don't want to speak out of school. Did he actually sue?
Apparently so, but to the degree that they ended up recusing themselves, I just didn't understand what was the purpose. What happened? Somebody said her lawyer sued them. Okay, I'll do a little bit of.
Yeah, I haven't done. I don't want to speak out of school. And
okay, no problem.
Yeah, I haven't researched what happened, but I mean, look, why would you sue judges? Is that a smart judges that are overseeing your court? That just looks bad. I mean, what's the basis of it? It could have been, again, it could be there was a comment that the judges were sued in an unrelated case. It could be.
Yeah.
It could be.
And maybe he's I don't know, maybe there's 10 judges, and over time he's ended up suing all 10 of them. So now he's coming before them because of this, and they need to recuse themselves because they've been sued by him. I can kind of see it. I don't think he sued them all for one reason. You know, everybody came to the flea market, so I had to sue everybody at the flea market.
So I was just doing some research on this. We can maybe talk about this real quickly, just to
Sure.
So apparently, David Horowitz, he has sued. It's Horowitz versus U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Tennessee. And so apparently Horowitz sued the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Tennessee and 4 of its federal district court judges in their official capacities, which is rare, but he did. Mm-hmm. And he's challenging the constitutionality of a local court order. It's Local Rule 8304. And that local rule restricts an attorney's ability to make public comments about pending litigation, which is allegedly violating the First Amendment, which, guess what? That's a good argument. I like that. So it's positioned to sue them in their official capacity because there's a constitutional issue. Right. He's not suing them because the judges crashed their car into his car or something like that. It's just that's the mechanics for this type of case. So it's not a lawsuit for personal damages. So for people who are speculating, so that's probably why the recusal. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? That
okay.
You know, that there's a constitutional issue that's being heard, and the judges didn't feel comfortable. You also got to understand that this is a highly, highly publicized case. It's a very political case, and federal court judges are appointed for life terms, and they don't want their future to be tainted by an allegation that they went a certain way, they made a certain order or decision based on the fact that the constitutionality of something was getting challenged by this lawyer. That could be why they said, better thing to do is to recuse ourselves and let the Sixth Circuit appoint new judges. That makes sense.
Okay. All right. I can rock with it. All right. Where do you think that one's going to go? Where do you think the Harpole case versus Owens, where do you see that one going?
Look, I think, I definitely think in discovery that Harpole's lawyers, when Candace gets deposed, if she gets deposed, she's going to have a hard time discussing the facts about the flights, the facts that she had in her hands at the time, the Fort Huachuca allegations. Okay, the fact that she should have known, and she likely had facts that controverted her allegations that Brian Harpole made a hit on Charlie Kirk. I think it's a tough case for the defense. And what's even more difficult is after the lawsuit, she didn't stop talking about it.
No, she didn't.
And so plaintiffs are going to argue that we have knowledge of falsity and reckless disregard for the truth. We tried to set the record straight. We gave her facts, and she doubled down on it instead. And that shows motive. It shows reckless disregard for the truth. And, you know, it shows that she's doing this to gain a following, to make money and cash in. And no lawyer wants to be on the receiving end of those kinds of allegations.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the JWhit Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please do me a favor and hit me up with that 3-piece special. Like the video, subscribe, and of course, share it with somebody who would also enjoy this type of content. And make sure you leave a comment because I do pin the best comments to the top. So thank you so much for tuning in today. And until next time, everybody, grace and peace.